the computer is still not working. So sorry about that. Yeah, I think so. So last week, Mary Magdalene encountered the risen Jesus in the garden near where he was buried. And although she had been Jesus' most steadfast companion, she did not, as you know, recognize him. Who would? I'm sure I don't know what a resurrected body would look like. And I don't think any of us really would. So we might have dreams and visions of our beloved ones, and perhaps we might even have seen a ghost or two in the course of our lives. But a resurrected body, that's probably another story altogether. Paul wrote, "In a twinkling of an eye, we shall be changed." So we don't really know what that means. So whatever happened that day, it should come as no surprise that not one of Jesus's followers knew who he was the first time they saw him. And just as an aside, 2,000 years later, most of Jesus's followers still don't recognize the resurrected Jesus, even though he gave explicit directions about where he would be found. So in today's gospel, we find the sudden appearance of Jesus in the upper room with the justifiably frightened disciples on the night of Easter night. They had heard from Mary, Jesus's tower of strength, that the teacher was very much alive. But could they really, really believe it? They were so frightened, and the news of something so outlandish as a resurrection just ratcheted up their level of fear. How were they going to deal with this new phenomenon? A dead man walking among them as if he were alive? How are they going to explain that one to others? Dealing with Palm Sunday and the mess of Holy Week cost Jesus' life and consigned them to their current situation, barricaded from the authorities. They were not liking this at all. I don't think anybody would like it. And so the disciples had every reason to fear, and they were not cowards. I don't think we should ascribe that adjective or noun to them. The time immediately following Jesus's execution was probably one of the very few times in early church history that the Romans really might have been on the lookout for the followers of Jesus, as the government tried to purge Jerusalem of his seditious teaching. There was indeed no king but Caesar. And Jesus was executed as a revolutionary, and revolutionaries always have adherents who try to destabilize the status quo, something Rome, like all empires, do not tolerate. So these radicals, they had to be tracked down so that their offending ideas and the folk who held them would be eliminated from public consciousness. So into that bastion of fear, where every tread on the stairs and every shout or blaring voice could be that of a Roman soldier wielding a sword, the risen Jesus slipped quietly into their midst and very quietly announced to them all one word: peace. And after showing them the wounds of crucifixion, he again said the word peace, a word that smoothed the rough edges of their anxiety and trepidation. It was a soft moment, I'd like to think, especially in counterbalance to what happened on Friday. And with no hint of retribution, Jesus's calm and serene presence might have really been surprising to the disciples, who after all were human beings and might have expected Jesus to come back with a demand for vengeance. But I think that the evangelist's understanding of Jesus's almost elusive presence in that room is so important, and it's far more important than what came afterwards, the legalistic forgiving of sins or not, in the case of a church who is not very forgiving, as we know. And the churchmen give that line about forgiving and retaining sins a great deal of weight and importance. And we all know that God will deal with sin in the divine's own good way and own good time. So instead of like sin and forgiving and vengeance and whatever, it was the comforting presence of Jesus that really mattered to those justifiably frightened and worried people. And it is the comforting, very real presence of Jesus that should matter to us. Jesus was no longer buried in that tomb for good. He is not under lock and key in the Vatican or in the cathedrals. He is with us, as he was with Mary and the disciples in the upper room, as they tried to figure out what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. The story of Jesus' presence in the upper room appears only in the Gospel of John, which was written around 100 of the Common Era. Luke's Gospel, written around 80, has the same type of post-resurrectional appearance in the story of disciples walking with a stranger along the road to Emmaus. Jesus' presence there is also elusive, but it's also comforting and beautiful. We're not there, and by extension, our hearts burning within us as we encountered the risen Jesus. So if you think about presence, the presence of God in Jesus is always at the edge of our hearts, at the corner of our eyes, even if we try to cover it up with locks and chains. And into our consciousness and unconsciousness, he creeps, his pierced hands and feet testifying to the cruelty of empire and power, his voice calling us to the Beatitudes and his kingdom values, in spite of what's happening around us. If we have eyes to see, he's there in every camp. He's in every bombed apartment building. He's in every refugee camp. And yes, he is even in the Kremlin as hard hearts try to distort, commandeer, and misrepresent his presence as tyrants have tried to do throughout the millennia. And everybody sitting here, you've all met Jesus. You've all seen him. You've all heard him. You've all sensed him in the darkest night of your souls. We've seen the work of his hands. We have heard his voice in our personal wilderness. We have met him when we were adrift and weeping with distress in our deserts. He has helped us move mountains and grow mustard trees. He has been with us when we felt the life flow out of us, when we have been anguished unto death. He gave us the pearl of great price, and he drove out our demons and restored faith in ourselves. He has given us strength to find the lost ones, including ourselves, and the ability to remember who we are and to whom we belong, even when the powers acting in his name tell us they intend to retain our sin. He has taught us about freedom, about hope, about faith, and about undying love. He has given us visions to see that we are all citizens in the kingdom of God. And with him, we have the strength to demand recompense from the strong ones. He is always with us on our journey, loving us when we are unlovable, remaining true when we ourselves were faithless, and reaching out when we despaired. And so when we despair, as we might do on a daily basis, watching the TV coverage of the obliteration of Ukraine, and the deaths of our sisters and brothers, we should know that God in Jesus is there, walking among the rubble, running the trains to safety as the bombs fall, picking up the injured and burying the dead. He accompanies mothers who try to bring their children to safety, even when those efforts fail. He works with refugees, opening homes to women and children who were driven away by the violence. He is the medical staff who keep injured people alive in basements and underground subway stations. It is God and Jesus who sits at the diplomat's table, working tirelessly to end the strife. Jesus, our Emmanuel, God with us, walks with us beyond time, beyond space, beyond human experience, and beyond what anybody could ever do to him. No one can control him, not the Roman Empire or the Russian or the American one, not even the church. No one can speak for him without using his own words. I have come to heal the brokenhearted, to give sight to the blind, and to free the oppressed. And so the powers can lock all the doors that they want. They can assemble convoys of troops at the borders. They can muzzle the press, and they can bomb the innocent. But the dead man and his message will always come walking through all of the defenses, appearing as if from nowhere, and saying to all who will listen one word: peace.